皆さん、こんにちは。僕はミスタースーです。今日のビデオは一緒に始めましょうよ。Hello class, so in this video we're going to be talking about radians and the unit circle, and we're going to derive all the angles on these special parts in the unit circle. So this is going to be basically a video where you're going to need to understand the patterns. So understand how this works, and you won't necessarily have to memorize a bunch of stuff. Also, it's a lot easier to just be able to derive this than memorize it. Alright, so if we start over here, so first of all, unit circle, this means a circle with radius 1. So that means if the radius is 1, we can easily get these coordinates. So over here, coordinate would be x is 1, 0, x is 1, y is 0, so 1, 0. So over here on the opposite end is negative 1, 0 for obvious reasons. Up here is 0, 1. And down here is 0, negative 1. You should be able to plot by this point, especially if you're watching this video. So I'm assuming you probably understand that. All right, so here is 180 degrees, right? So if we go over this way, that's half a circle. That's 180 degrees. Now remember last time we established that this is pi radians. So we're going to use that kind of as a basis for everything else. So if that's half a circle, what is half of that? That's going over here. So that would put us over here, which is pi over 2. All right. And let's reason with some of the other things then. But first thing, let's actually look at what angle this should be. So that's pi over 2 once. If we do it again, that's 2 pi over 2, which is pi. If we do it again, you get, this is 3 pi over 2. So just kind of keep that logic in mind as we go through the rest of this. Okay, so let's look at those other points then. So if we take that, so pi over 2, if we divide that into 3 pieces, then we have this over here. You've got 1, 2, 3 equal pieces. That's why I have it drawn exactly like that. So that means, let's get this blue thing and just copy that over. All right, so that is a third of this. So pi over 2 divided by 3 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/3, so you get pi over 6. So that thing is pi over 6, so we can write that in there. And let's just reason with this then. Let's get another pi over 6 and see where that lands us. Just going to put that there. And then rotate it so that it is in, like, exactly on the circle. Or at least close enough. All right. So over there, the question is, what do we have now? What we have is 2 pi over 6. What does that reduce to, though? Pi over 3. So, okay, we see that we got 2 pi over 6, and that gives us pi over 3. Just fixing that pi over 6 over there. Wrong layer. All right. So let's get another one. If we do that again, we will get to a certain place, which shouldn't surprise us too much. Now this is 3 pi over 2s, right? So 3 pi over 2, as we established before, should equal pi over 2. Because we went from pi over 2, divided it into 3 pieces, and got pi over 6. And now we're exactly at pi over 2 now. And what exactly is that angle? We have 3 pi over 6 reduces to pi over 2. All right, so then if you do the rest of them like that, you'll notice that what you end up getting is these points over here. And that'll be all of the pi over 6's going all the way until 2 pi. So this would be 4 pi over 6 which equals 2 pi over 3. And this is 5 pi over 6, which doesn't reduce. This is 6 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6. Notice we're just going up by 1. So that'd be 4 pi over 3, and this is 9 pi over 6, which reduces to 3 pi over 2, and then 10 pi over 6, which reduces to 5 pi over 3, 11 pi over 6, which doesn't reduce, then 12 pi over 6, which is 2 pi. Notice that this is also, if we just started there, that's also 0 radians. So I'm going to write that in red. 0 radians is right there, which should make pretty obvious sense, but yeah. Alright, so let's get rid of these blue arrows over here so that we can reason with the green ones. Alright, green arrows. So if we divide pi over 2 by 2, so divide it into 2 pieces, we get pi over 4. Again, that should make perfect sense if you can fraction. If not, then learn how to fraction. And we get there. So perfectly pi over 4. So let's just write that angle in there. Okay, so let's do that again then. And we're going to copy that on over here. And I just rotate it so it's on the circle. Because then we also see that once we do that, we have, okay, that's a little bit inside, but close enough. How many pi over 4s is this? This is 2 pi over 4. 2 pi over 4 equals pi over 2. So that should make perfect sense. Because we went 1, 2. 2 of them. 2 times 2 pi over 4, pi over 2. Alright, so if you do another one then you get 3 pi over 4 here. That doesn't reduce. And in here, you end up with 4 pi over 4. That's equal. And you go another pi over 4. You get 5 pi over 4. Doesn't reduce. Go another one. You get 6 pi over 4, which reduces to 3 pi over 2. And another one you get 7 pi over 4. And you get 8 pi over 4, which is also 2 pi. Right here. Equals that. Alright, so let's just erase this so we only see the angles, and let's just look at a few different patterns here. So for one thing, at the 4 compass corners, you have the pi over 4s and the pi over 6s giving you an angle, versus at every other point, pretty much you have either the pi over 6s or the pi over 4s giving you angles. And then basically all the pi over 6 ones, what you can do is just go 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, rather than memorizing. So here are the actual values you'll be using. So you'll be using these ones specifically. And it's more useful to memorize, or not memorize. Actually, it's more useful to not memorize. It's useful to know how the pattern works rather than memorize all of these. If you can get all those patterns, then it'll make a lot more sense why these even happen. And you'll see that there are lots of patterns in trigonometry in general, and it'll be very, very helpful and important to be able to get these. So that's basically it for now. The patterns are not that difficult, so don't make them difficult. All you're doing is basically counting up from 1. So don't overcomplicate, but obviously also don't oversimplify. Look at what's there, learn what's there, get it. ご覧いただきありがとうございました。楽しんでいただければいいねして、コメントして、購読してください。次のビデオに会いましょうよ。